Good evening. Thanks for tuning in to Face to Face. I'm your host, Dennis Ward. Our guest this week is the Chief of Shoal Lake 40, Erwin Redsky. Chief Redsky is a longtime chief here in Shoal Lake 40, and that's where we are today, which Shoal Lake 40 straddles the Manitoba and Ontario border. And we're at what is known as Freedom Road, an all-season road that's now a reality, but it's been a very difficult road to get to this point, one that's taken a century. Chief Redsky, I appreciate you taking some time to join us here, and it's great to be on this road. Did you ever think that you would get to this point?
No, to be very honest with you, I never thought this day would come, but we're very, very excited about it. It's just an amazing story. It's a 100-year-old story, and it's just, you know, right from 1919 to the present day, it's been a long, long fight in terms of getting road access to our First Nation here.
And for those who don't know about Shoal Lake 40 and why this road is so important, can you give us a little history on, you know, how Shoal Lake 40 became a man-made island?
In the turn of in the early 1900s, the city of Winnipeg was looking for a water source because they considered themselves the future Chicago of the North, and they were looking for a reliable water source. And Shoal Lake was one of the options that they considered. We're 100 miles east of Winnipeg. Shoal Lake is 350 feet higher in elevation, so they came to look at as a source of water here. But in order for that to happen, they had to secure the land, Shoal Lake 40 reserve land in the early 1900s to make that happen. So quite a long story. The first authorization that they got for Shoal Lake diversion water was Ontario Ordering Council in 1913. And subsequent to that, the International Joint Commission had a similar authorization, Ordering Council, because the Shoal Lake is connected to Lake of the Woods through Ash Rapids. That's the reason why international waters were involved. So subsequent to that, in 1915, they went to Canada because Canada was responsible for on-reserve First Nations. So they went to Canada and expropriated over 3,000 acres of our best land that we had in order for the city of Winnipeg to draw water from there. So we were always been a mainland community at that point, but you know, with the water intake, they constructed a dike along the Indian Bay and cut the neck of the peninsula off in one of our first in our lands to divert that water, dirty, mucky water from Falcon River to divert it to Snowshoe Bay. So that diversion and the canal that made us into a man-made island for the past 100 years, and it was very, very difficult, you know, living in that condition with no access to the rest of our lands. And as a matter of fact, we were told we were trespassing on our own lands. So that's the irony of that. And you know, the traditional village, that's where we lived, where the water intake sits today, and it was very, very difficult for us to live under those forced isolation we call for the past 100 years. So to be standing here in front of you, in front of the world today, that we're finally built Freedom Road, it's just an amazing story. It's just unreal, surreal sometimes to believe it. And many people have said over the years that they won't believe it until they see it. And here it is.
Yeah, it was something to see coming in too. You know, you've kind of touched on the impacts. What have been the impacts on the people here over those 100 years?
Oh, they've been devastating. You know, when you're trespassing on other people's land to get home, it's very frustrating at times. You know, even just to get home or just to check the mail or get groceries for the family. You know, having to cross the body of water to get there, and whether it's in a fall freeze up or spring thaw, you know, you know, it's very dangerous. It was very, very difficult to live in these conditions, and many people have left because of that. And you know, with Freedom Road coming now, we want to hope that they will return home at some point and develop some sort of a plan to address that with the future housing that's needed. So it's very difficult. It's been very, you know, I feel so proud of my people that stuck around and lived under those forced conditions, and for many, many years. So proud of that, and resilient people. You know, it's just amazing how we're able to pull through, because we pull together as a community to survive. We're always on survival mode almost, and you know, so it's very, very difficult.
You speak about survival mode, and really lives have been lost from people just trying to do what many take for granted, like you say, getting groceries, getting the mail.
Yeah, like I said, it's been very, very difficult. You know, many people in Canada take road access for granted. For us, even the gravel and the material that you see behind me is like gold for us. It was like gold for us, because we didn't have that material. You know, we couldn't build any. We couldn't fix our roads. We couldn't build any, you know, good housing, and you know, through the expropriation of our lands, that they took the rich resource of gravel along with our ancestral burial grounds. So it's been very difficult. It's very, very difficult 100 years. I only came in the latter part of this struggle and fight, and I'm just glad I'm part of it.
We, you know, have been talking about the 100 years, and as we said, 1919 is the year construction on that aqueduct that provides the city of, you know, 750,000 people with water. 100 years later, how do you reflect back on that now?
I just amazing how it took so long to build a road to my community. 100 years. I always think about Chief Pete Redsky in 1919, where he tried to address that at that time in terms of, you know, what's going on back here. It's not right. You know, what are you doing to our lands? This is our homeland. So what are you doing? But he was told by the Indian agent that you know, he tried to go to Ottawa, and you know, he was told he'll stay home, Chief Redsky. You know, we'll look after you. And thinking back now, as a present chief now, you know, when I'm in Ottawa, I think about Pete Redsky. You know, I think about all the chiefs and councils before me, and all of the frustration. You know, I went through that as well. You know, going to Ottawa and Toronto and trying to correct what the government has done to us, and it's been very frustrating. But you know, to see this day, to see this gravel here, which we call gold at one point, it's a resource that's building our road for us. And you know, if I take it to the community where our little dozer sits, that's where Tom Anderson started our little trail to the canal, and he was here every day. He was like a workhorse. It just, you know, he was doing it for the kids, he always used to say, and it was just a total community effort. That what you see here is 100 years of hard work.
Do you think, you know, your past family members, your ancestors, could have ever imagined that it would be 100 years before you'd be reconnected?
I don't think that's what the two chiefs in Shoal Lake, I don't think that's what they envisioned in the treaty, 1873. This is not what they envisioned. They envisioned true partnerships with other governments, with the newcomers and settlers, because we lived off the land and the resources, and we've always been self-sustaining. And communities, and for my ancestors today that are watching us right now, you know, they're very finally. They said they're probably saying they're happy to see this. They've been fighting for it as well. Former leaders of the past 100 years, and we're just very excited. Finally, we have road access. We've got so much opportunities. And there's also some of the negative effects as well that we're trying to get a handle on too as well.
And we're going to talk about some of those opportunities and perhaps some of the bad that might come with an all-season road. We're going to continue our conversation here with Shoal Lake 40 Chief Erwin Redsky on Face to Face after a quick break. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is Chief Erwin Redsky of Shoal Lake 40 First Nation, and we're out near Freedom Road, road 100 years in the making. And Chief Redsky, I mean, aside from the obvious, the ease of getting back and forth for your members here, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to now in terms of having all year-round access?
I think the first and foremost has always been safety, but with economic development opportunities that lie ahead for our community we're very excited about. like I said earlier, we've always been a self-sustaining community, living off the land and resources. You know, having been a commercial walleye fishery, a sustainable community before, that was closed and shut down in the early 1980s. And we tried to do alternative economic development. For example, the cottage lot development was one of our proposals in the 70s, and because that was happening around us. So that was vigorously opposed by the city of Winnipeg and the province of Manitoba. So basically, their former water treatment for a long, long time was stop all any development out here. So it was very difficult to live under those conditions. So every chance we get, we look at economic development. So we were kind of forced into this tripartite agreement in June 1989, which ironically is 30 years ago. And you know, we can finally implement the tripartite agreement where the province of Manitoba and the city of Winnipeg have an obligation to make every effort to promote economic development. So we're very, very excited about that. The road itself is a tripartite agreement project. So with a lot of opportunities there for local members to participate in the construction of the road. So we're very, very pleased that the road is complete now with community involvement. We're very happy, and not too many projects led by First Nation is under budget and on time, and so we're very, very proud of that. We're using that model in other projects.
You know, we talk about how the city and close to 1 million people get their water supply from here, but the community itself is for more than 2 decades been under a boil water advisory, and maybe just a little on the irony of that, but now with this road, the ability to hopefully address that.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's one of our the ironies of this whole story is, you know, the Indigenous community has suffered for all these years for the benefit of another community, and you know, we thought that was not fair and that was not equitable, and we certainly tried to educate and create that awareness of what's going on in today's world and today's Indigenous communities, where a lot of communities don't have the benefit of the clean water that all communities have in Canada. So yeah, it's an irony that we've told the story so many times, and many Canadians shake their heads in disbelief that this is going on, and we need to continue the education. We need to continue that awareness of our Indigenous communities across Canada, and you know, water is a human right. Water is sacred to us, and we need to all benefit from that.
Of course, you know, having to barge in equipment in the summer if you're going to do any construction or anything like that. Now, with this road, things would be cheaper, materials and work. Are you looking to address the water treatment plant and some of the other things here?
Oh yes, that was the first and foremost priority. Of course, was the getting safe all-weather access to our community, so we can start rebuilding our community. First project on the agenda is the water treatment plant, and you know, we're so far behind everyone else in Canada that, you know, many First Nations have water treatment plants and are replacing theirs, and we're just finally getting ours because of our situation. So with road access, the water treatment plant is in the works right now as we speak. We're hopefully go out to tender very soon, and that along with the new school, we're very happy about that. That's coming in the next couple of years as well. But and also the influx of people that will want to come home, we have to address that, because we've been lagging behind in terms of housing as well. So we need to address the housing issue. You know, replacing our existing homes and build new ones for the people that left here, were forced to leave here, and we want to welcome them back home, and so we can rebuilding a community.
We're talking about all the benefits of this road, but of course, you know, there's been some who've talked about some of the bad that might be able to rear its head with an all-season road in terms of, you know, drugs coming into the community, things like that. I guess you're looking at those types of things? Yes,
in a parallel with economic development, we need to address the social impact of the road, the negative social impact potentially. So we're addressing that as we speak. We're looking for a community, a well-being, safe community. That's our goal. That's our vision. We want to be active participants in the economy, and also address the negative impacts that the road may bring, including drugs and alcohol, whatever. So we want to. It's a parallel road now. We're not only looking at economic development, but we want to address the social issues, and that's part of the reason for economic development is to generate our own revenues, because many governments are making cutbacks in certain areas, and we cannot depend on government handouts to address our social issues. We need to generate our own revenues through economic development to address that. So it's very, very concerned about that, but we're addressing it moving forward.
Some may know or not know of Shoal Lake 40 through some of the various campaigns that have gone over the years, whether they be walks or the action outside of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights when it was opening, your own museum for human rights violations. There's been numerous things. Are there any of those campaigns throughout all this that stick out for you?
Yeah, I think it was 1914 actually, when the Canadian Museum was opening in Winnipeg. So we basically took that opportunity, to address what was going on this end of the pipe, and we, out of respect, we decided to spend 4 days during their opening of their museum, and we lit our sacred fire there and spent 4 days on the hill there to educate not only Winnipeggers but Canadians and citizens around the world. And many people were shocked at what was going on in 2014, and we spent 4 days there to educate and promote create that awareness of what is going on at Shoal Lake 40. So it was that stands out for me, because we spent 4 days there, and it was kind of cold in September in that year in 2014. It's just vivid in my mind.
For me, having covered your story here a number of times, one of the things that sticks out for me was a walk in Winnipeg one time when there'd be small actions and small groups would come out, but it was behind the legislature, and I thought it was in the front, and I was like, oh, not very many people here. Go to the back, and there was thousands of people, and we walked through the streets of Winnipeg down Broadway to the Human Rights Museum again, and that's, for me, when I thought people are really paying attention now. Is there a time for you too where you felt there was a real turning point in people paying attention, and you thought things were going to happen?
Well, like I said earlier, this is a 100-year-old story. It began in 1919. We're standing here in 2019, and we're finally addressing that. And there are many, many milestones along the way that I can reflect to. In 2014 to when we opened our own museum of human rights violations. We had so many visitors that come visit our museum, and to educate and promote that awareness. Whether it's treaty commissioners, or the likes of David Suzuki and his family, and the mayors and ministers, and just ordinary Canadians, university students, elementary students. We're just open to educate about our land, our people, and our resources, and the lower lack thereof. And it's becoming an institute in itself, our museum, and we want to build on that and to educate Canadians.
Yeah, you speak about the visitors to the community. One of them was the Prime Minister, I believe the first sitting Prime Minister to ever visit Shoal Lake 40. And what role did that play in all this? And what was it about these three governments, the City of Winnipeg and the Manitoba government and this Liberal government, that finally made this happen, do you think, after so many governments over the years?
Yeah, it's been such a frustrating, because we're situated between Ontario and Manitoba. The water itself is international boundary, international regulation through International Joint Commission. Ontario, Manitoba, City of Winnipeg municipality. It was such a nightmare trying to sort all this out, and we're just sometimes I thought it was impossible, and many people thought that this day would be impossible, and we just, through resiliency of the people and determination that we're going to get this done, and we're finally getting it done. It's an amazing story.
It sure is an amazing story, and one of resilience, and we're going to continue to talk about that here on Face to Face. We've just got to step aside for another quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation with Shoal Lake 40 Chief Erwin Redsky. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is Shoal Lake 40 Chief Erwin Redsky and Chief Redsky. We're standing in front of the AMEC2, the ferry that was really the lifeline to the community here in the spring and summer months until the ice was ready to drive on. What would go through your mind as you've made what I assume was millions of trips on this?
You know, it's a little bit of mixed emotions when I see it on dry land here, because a mick too, a mick is a beaver, it belongs in the water, right? So kind of mixed emotions in terms of a mick sitting on dry land. It served its purpose during our difficult time of getting in and out of our community, because it was our only lifeline to the outside world, and to see it up here and to the condition it's in. So we hope that at some point that we do have a buyer for it. That's kind of the mixed emotion I'm talking about, to get rid of it, because it provided a lifeline to our community for so long.
Were there times when you were coming across, either coming to the community or leaving, though, where you would reflect on it and hope that you didn't have to ride it anymore?
Yeah, there are many times. You know, it only ran from 7 in the morning to midnight, so basically we were living under a curfew for many years during those times. And you know, I certainly won't miss it, but in a way, it did provide that lifeline. And when it was running, there were times when it broke down, and you know, it's very expensive to operate and maintain that vessel. It's regulated by Transport Canada, so there's strict regulations. So it basically costs us pretty much a house every year just to maintain it.
Any guesses on you know, how many trips that made for you?
Oh my gosh, one day alone, I don't know. You just saw one of our former captains of the vessel that would know the details of that, but I can't recall how many times I've been on it. And the people, you know, visitors, and you know, we've had assemblies here that it's just a lot of people use that vessel, and it served its purpose. And now that we have Freedom Road, it's you know, it's sad to see it go, but we hope it finds a new home somewhere.
So if you're looking for a ferry, AMEC2 is ready for sale. Well, Chief Redsky, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the show, and you know, it's a real pleasure to be able to drive out here as well, and to see all that hard work finally pay off, even though it took so much, a lot of perseverance for yourself and this community.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. A few months after we shot this episode of Face to Face, Erwin Redsky resigned as Chief of Shoal Lake 40. Just days after funding for a water treatment plant was announced, Redsky said it was time for him to move on to the next stage in his journey. Redsky spent 14 years as the chief and was a counselor and administrator for a decade prior to that. In a public statement, he said, "Being an elected representative is incredibly demanding, and my family paid a heavy price in the loss of my time and attention. We wish Chief Redsky the best in his future endeavors." That is all the time we have for the show today. We're always looking for new guests, so if you have any suggestions, please email us at news@aptn.ca. And of course, this show and past episodes are available as podcasts. You can find those at aptn.ca/face-to-face podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Face to Face. I'm Dennis Ward.